Welcome to Ragbag. My name's Frank Burton. My guest at this time is Colour. He's been on the show before. He's also appeared on I Like the Sound a few times. He's a prodigiously talented guy. I like that word, prodigiously. That's good, prodigiously. 15 albums in 15 years. And now we're celebrating his latest. It's called One Half. Now, this interview took place a few months ago and I was yet to hear the new record at that time. So Colour gives us a lowdown on that. We also discuss some aspects of his previous album, Colourtivation, and we'll hear a song from that album as well. But first, let's hear a brand new track from Colour's 15th album, One Half.
And so, you know, you're just a child in the dark. You see, you're all alone at night. You know the darkness very well. You see the color just forming light within the dark. They must require a sacrificing of what you think you know. What are you waiting for? 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 The consciousness to evolve. The consciousness to be formed requires the darkness and no more. The consciousness to be formed. You say it quietly, whisper it to no one. Keep this secret safe until no soul. Every child's born in the dark. There's consciousness to grow. Do not fear the dark in what you may see. For all those images and all those forms are as you are and will always be. Such is darkness, so is light. They're a function all the same. As above, it's so below. So is fear and is love.
I'm working on my 15th album right now. In the last 15 years, I've released one every year on April 27th. Somewhat sonic autobiographical music. Yeah, April 27th, 2021. You can find it on my website, cullah.com, which is cullah.com. You can listen to all the other albums too for free. Either you can download them on my site. Anyone who wants some music for their YouTube videos or for their podcasts or whatever it is, I also release all my music under a Creative Commons attribution license, which means anyone can use my music as long as they just put my name in the description or in the credits. And yeah, this album is no different. It's gonna be released the same way on my website, and I'm actually quite excited about this album. There's a lot of time this year for composition. I was going to be on a big tour on, well, I guess it's 2021 already. But last year I was going to be on a big tour was coming over to England. I was already in the works. I was already working with some bands and already setting up some shows and stuff. It was going to be East Coast, West Coast, England, Germany, but maybe 2022, maybe. Seems, hopefully. But gotta make my way back over there. Regardless, the music itself, I'm quite excited about. I've been diving deeper into lots of elements of Jungian psychology, and I've been reading a lot of books about early Christian mysticism and late Jewish mysticism and stuff, of a lot of these new texts that have been found of the Gnostics and the Nag Hammadi library and the Dead Sea Scrolls and those stuff. I'm really very fascinated with a lot of these old myths and have been studying more about a lot of elements of that and trying to incorporate certain myths and storytelling and in different types of intentions in my songs. And I had a little more time this year to kind of hone in on some of those aspects of things that really kind of strike chords in myself, of different ideas and concepts and feelings. And that's kind of the idea about the year in and year out making music. Is it's really just that year in review or that year what I was able to come up with, that are reflections of my own insight into myself and what I'm feeling and how I can reflect what's happening in the world and in myself in that music. And so every year is a little different. And this is the year where it's my half album. It's called Half or One Half, however you want to say it. It's just one over two. And it's half because it's my 30th birthday and my 15th album. So a little bit of a milestone. So happy to be doing it. So anyone who wants to listen to it, just search Kulla on Google and or wherever it is you listen to your music, and I'm sure you'll find it.
Cool. And since we last spoke, you had the Cultivation album out, 2020.
Yep.
It seems to be kind of an expansion upon the eclecticism of your music. I don't know if you'll agree with that or not, but it's kind of like, it seems like there's just loads and loads of things going on, and you've got kind of then the folky sort of bluegrassy elements within this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, every year is kind of like that. I try to challenge myself sonically, and although they end up all being very similar types of songs, I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I'm learning a little bit more about theory and trying to understand exactly what it is that my instincts are trying to tell me, and my aural training, which is what I had mostly growing up. I didn't have much theoretical training, so I just have this. I had years and years of just hearing and trying to replicate, but never really understood what I was doing or even making from a technical standpoint, which, it's good and bad. I've heard lots of arguments, but at this point I'm trying to expand into more. That's part of the depth of this album, and is expanding things, trying to challenge myself every year. And there's a couple banjo tunes on this one, and there's some electronic and almost techno, but more housey stuff. And some synth pop, a lot of faster music on this. And I got an outlaw, like rockabilly song about Lucifer, the light bearer, from the early Gnostic stuff and the Milton work, Great Englishman, the Paradise Lost stuff. Just trying to challenge myself with that stuff too. Got a lot of variety, and it's I enjoy all that stuff. I like throwing a crazy electronic song right next to a bluegrass tune. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah, that's nice. It's good. It's kind of like it makes it really interesting, and it makes it kind of unexpected in terms of like you're not going to know what's going to come next with that.
Yeah, I like that feeling personally.
I think my favorite track on the album is the Forgotten song.
Yeah,
I particularly enjoyed that one. Is it? What is the? I've just pressed the button and it started playing it. Is there a story behind it? A particular kind of story behind the song?
Well, there was, but I forgot it. No, I'm just kidding. It's interesting. Like that one's a little more polished on the album. I think some of it in that was. I was really happy with that song, and it's kind of got an English folk vibe. English or Irish folk, 6/8, and kind of this digga Irish English folk thing. I'm a huge fan of Johnny Flynn, and I'm sure there's some influence in there. it was inspired by an Oscar Wilde poem. I don't even remember which one. I just had his collected works, and I was just looking for some inspiration, and and try to get something that was reflecting something real in my subconscious or in my my state of mind. And just scrolling through some of his poems, and I saw one that was like a boat song, or boat poem, and then in parentheses for song. And I was like, hey, a poem for song. That's what I'm looking for. And so then I saw a couple, and I just picked out a couple words and just got inspired by fair wind. There was one like fair winds and boat, sailing a boat. And so then I just kind of took that premise and started writing this song with some melodies that I had messing around with. And then eventually it turned into that song, which was essentially it was almost a warning to myself, or I was going down this path with this relationship where I kind of knew that I wasn't really going to end the way that I thought it was. And that my partner at the time and myself were seeing things from different levels and different, definitely had different understandings of what was happening with the relationship. And that song kind of was the understanding of it, but I had written it like right at the time we were starting to date, and then it finished by the time I got dumped. So it worked out because the song is basically about the person who's telling the story about really kind of wondering and putting the blame on things and not actually facing to reality. They're a little delusional. And the relationship is this boat, represented by this boat, and the person singing is wondering, and wondering and making excuses like, oh, this person must have forgotten the amazing time that we had on this boat. It was so great. We had this great relationship, and we have this great boat together, and there's beautiful winds blowing and all this stuff. But then as the song progresses, you realize that maybe that's not the case. And then it switches from blaming the other, being like, oh, you must have just forgotten. And then it changed to like, oh, I forgot. And then you started blaming yourself. So in that song, it kind of like, it's this projection, outward fantasy projection kind of turned inside. And then at the end, it's kind of this realization that, oh, wait, it's actually an I problem. And even at the end of the song, it's not quite clear that the person hasn't figured out their delusions. But like even, thinking that this is this great thing, even becoming aware that this boat that they have is rotten, but she should still enjoy it, even though there's these terrible things. And there's a pale blue sun, which is actually the moon. So he's calling the sun the moon and all this stuff. So this guy is in a fantasy, really. And the Forgotten song is, it's kind of just this idea of not facing to the reality of things and building your own fantasy around this concept of a relationship, as spoken about through this boat. So yeah, and it's a great fiddle player and upright bass, and it's a nice song. I ended up being really happy with that song in particular on that album. So.
Oh, have you forgotten our boat we did sail? The hull it was rotten, and the new sun was pale. Or have you forgotten how the fair winds blow? Or how we were taught to find solace in woe? Have you forgotten me, love? Have you mistaken my heart, and it's breaking for the fair winds blowing in the pale blue sun?
looking back at the song, I'm like, I think this is, and it's that same thing. It's like, yeah, I know this isn't going to end well. And so it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I might be that guy. Because I remember at the time, actually, when I first wrote it, I was like, wow, this is a really beautiful song. I was like, but that doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know where that came from. That must just be from something else. It's just like, it's like totally not a reflection of what's happening in I was like, okay, now I'm like, okay, I need to pay. I think I needed to it was still part of the process of like, no, I still need to be delusional. I still need to be delusional. But
it's interesting having the song as that kind of artifact of that time in your life, I guess, and it meaning a certain thing at one point and then meaning a certain other thing at a later point.
yeah, the songs have lives of their own in that sense, like, and then they take on different meaning when people come to me and they tell me their meaning, and then I start like integrating into that too, which is interesting sometimes too, how the songs evolve beyond me, and that's part of doing every year, and part of that whole sonic autobiography is the fact of I can listen to this stuff from talk about jogging memories. I listened to songs from 2006, 2007, or 8, and the if I really go into it in a reflective mind state, or like or a meditative state where I like can get, I almost get transported back into those mindsets and into those memories and stuff, and it's really quite interesting, quite powerful for me. Like, it gets very emotional because, sometimes when I'm listening to it, it depends on my state, my intention going into it, whether or not I want that to happen or not. Usually I can preface it, just being like, okay, I'm just going to go listen to this. And because it's just, or I'm listening to because someone's playing it or it's being played or whatever it is. But sometimes I'll listen to my discography, usually after an album or like is released, or right when I'm done with one, I'll listen to previous ones because I'm just so sick of the one. And I'm usually at a point where I'm so sick of it. And I actually like, it's like, it goes through stages of development of an album. And when it's, I love it and then I hate it. And then, then I love it. And then I'm just sick of it. There's all these different phases rather, or stages, whatever and it usually takes me like a solid year to two to really get back to appreciating this album as it is. Because usually that whole next year, I'm in a very kind of critical state where I'm listening to it and I'm still hearing all the things that I should have done of the mixing and the production, or like being like, well, I definitely should have re-recorded those vocals before giving it to the mixing engineer. Like, those vocals sound like shit, or whatever it is. But after a year or so, it's like, well, that's definitely is what it is. And it's kind of nice because I get to abandon the songs a little bit, which gives me some more freedom to just move on and start making some more sounds.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go with that sort of thing, because I feel that way about my own kind of work that I produce in terms of like, particularly, it's interesting because there's kind of certain stories that I've written that I've kind of rediscovered that I forgot that I'd written them. And I don't have any memory of having written that, but obviously it was me and it was published as me.
Right.
So, unless I've got kind of a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. But I think it's just a matter of it being kind of 15 years ago, and I don't kind of remember it, kind of getting the idea for it or writing the thing. Going back in time, sort of like 5 or 6 years, it's kind of like I'll kind of rediscover stuff that I've done then. But it kind of feels like it was a different person who was doing it.
Yeah.
But because I was a different person then, I was a very different person 5 or 6 years ago. In a way, I can claim I can't claim to have responsibility over those things. And the bits that I like about it, I can go, yeah, that's great. I really like that. And the bits that I don't like about it are kind of like, well, that's okay because it was a different guy doing it. I see it as kind of a double sort of positive. So the negative bits I can just sort of discard, and the positive things I can just claim to be victories of mine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that it comes with the territory, right? Like there's failure, constantly be failing. And that's part of the yearly cycle thing. I have no choice but to fail each year, right? It's like one way or another, this song is going to be released, and whether or not it's this perfect thing or not, which it usually isn't, but it's usually good enough. And, it just kind of has to be, really. And it's interesting what you said about like really only having a 5 to 6 year memory, because it's interesting because I listen to these old songs and it's like sometimes the memory that gets jogged is the memory of like me remembering it from 5 years ago. You know what I mean? Like it's I'll have the big memory that sticks out is actually the memory of me hearing it 5 years ago and whatever feelings and thoughts that was going on in that moment. So it's like, wow, sometimes, and it is 100% like I'll listen to some of the stuff, be like, that's a different person. 2006, are you kidding me? Like these music, like I was a freaking child. Like I even looking back at pictures, I was with this half album, I'm making a box set of 15 CDs and a little booklet. And so I'm going back through all these like pictures to try and find like photos of me in those years when the album was released. And just seeing that and then like being able to put that over the music and being like, wow, like that doesn't even feel like me. Like I remember that. And it just feels so, that's what's weird about memory and about pictures and recording this stuff is just like, yeah, it does feel like a completely different person, but I know that that's stuff that it's both me and both not, it's both definitely is me, but it's definitely a different me. Right. And, it doesn't have, you don't have to get too philosophical at the end here,
but it is interesting though, that as far as everybody else is concerned, those 15 things were made by the same person. Whereas kind of your reality is more that actually it's 15 different people who are related in some way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's everyone's, I mean, physically too, right? I mean, from my understanding, we become a whole new set of molecules or something. There's some statistic like that every so often. We are literally, if you're a materialist, right, and want to just, like a lot of science dogma and science today is very material oriented, and even from that perspective, if you're a completely different set of atoms and molecules, right?
Technically speaking, you are completely different,
right? Yeah, I'm sure there's some genetic markers that say the same, but like, yeah, I mean, but I like that idea of, I think it was like Tesla had some of the ideas, and then there's this have you heard of I think he went to Cambridge, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake?
No, I don't know.
He's repopularizing these like different hypotheses of morphogenetic resonance, which is an interesting, thing about resonance, speaking about sound here, is essentially like the idea that there are resonances in each creature that has to do with the changes of our genes, and about how, like and I guess the skinny of his theory is that human bodies are more like television sets, and consciousness is like a television signal. And so based on the genetic code of each individual creature, depending on what they're born as or whatever, they have certain amounts of instructions in the genes, right, in the genetics, but then there's this other element of this kind of consciousness, or this other force that kind of helps guide that growth, right? It's like when you look at a cell and then it goes into mitosis, right, and it just breaks into two, how the hell does it know it's going to be a horse or if it's going to be a human, right? Like, I'm sure it's a lot of it's genetic, with the genetic code, but there is still a lot of question as to like some of that inner workings. There's, we don't know that fully. And it's an interesting theory just about the collective kind of a more collective, trying to understand and make sense of people like Carl Jung's work with the collective unconscious, right? But like trying to understand that from a more material, or like how can we come up with actual physical models to try and figure that out, as opposed to just being more psychological theory, musings of alchemists,
Yeah. It's a pretty mind-blowing stuff when you start going into all of this stuff, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's all resonance.
Here I come and here I go, off along the dusty road to hell. To hell, to hell. So join my table, pour more wine. What's mine is yours, but what's yours is certainly mine. It's mine, oh mine. All your land and all your time, and your precious little child is mine. Tell you this, your nakedness reveals you are a slave, so be brave. Now you know the knowledge of the good and evil. You have no choice but to drink my wine. Venerate me, well I know it's a crying shame. And it's me, your
Thank you for listening. Many, many thanks to Colour for participating once again in the ragbag world. Check out his website, colour.com, that's C-U-L-L-A-H. I was going to spell it all out in the phonetic alphabet, but that might just confuse everybody. I don't know. Is that an international thing? I don't know. Charlie, Uniform, Lima Lima, Alpha, Hotel. Does that mean anything to the international listeners, or is that just a UK thing? I wonder.